Jack McKenney from the National Sports Media Association here. I am here with Kevin Dupont. Congratulations on your award. Thank you for joining me today. Tell us a little bit about what this award means to you, and congratulations once again.
Well, thank you, Jack. It's a pleasure to be with you here. What does it mean to me? I suppose at this late stage of my career, it's just always nice to have anybody, first of all, say nice things in this era where you open up your email, you open up postings to your stories and on Twitter, and you're barraged by many times, too often, just a lot of rhetoric and mean-spiritedness. So when somebody actually comes up and gives you an attaboy, which isn't that frequent, so it's really nice. It is. There's also when it gets mentioned in your own paper, and then people in your own community read of the award. There's sort of an echo effect in that, where it teases out more nice things from nice people. So, you don't get into this business for two things: A, money, or B, to be patted on the back very much. So when it happens, it's very nice.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit about how you got into this, right? Where did the passion come from? And obviously you've been covering the Boston Bruins for a very long time. Where did this passion come from? Did you see yourself doing this as a kid? Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, that goes way back now. So as I'm finishing up high school in the late 60s, I actually graduated in 71. But through those years, trying to think of things that I wanted to do, I can't tell you that I settled on writing. I settled initially on weighing such things as becoming a Catholic priest, if you can believe that. Mm-hmm. But I settled on applying to colleges for either accounting, couple of schools for that, or for communications, sports writing. And frankly, I was hedging my bet there, as I've probably done my whole life, in terms of thinking, well, it might not work out. It probably won't work out. I better have something so I can crunch numbers. But nonetheless, I got into Boston University. I got into their broadcast and film major at the time. I don't even know if they have that. The school itself has changed its name within Boston University. And I frankly went that route because I wanted to be. We only had 3 television stations at the time here in Boston, channels 4, 5, and 7. And I figured, well, I'll try to be one of the sports anchors on channel 4, 5, or 7. And I've done a lot of TV since. Obviously, my career has been centered on, or 99% writing, but I've done enough TV to know that I'm glad I didn't go that route for a lot of reasons that I won't tie up your time here. But I did change to a print journalism major my sophomore year, and again, thinking of it as security. People will laugh now because at the time we were being told, you heard this a lot in journalism school, this is guaranteed work. This is almost like a work permit. If you work for a newspaper, you'll never get, well, I suppose you could get fired, but the jobs will always be there. That was the thinking in the early and mid 70s. And of course, gullible as I am, I bought every word of it. So obviously not the case. No one anticipated what would happen 20 years later with the internet and all of that. Yeah. But that's really where I gravitated as a sophomore. Yeah. As a sophomore at BU. I did enjoy writing some in high school. I can't say a lot, but I did have a couple of teachers, one, Mrs. Kinney, especially, always encouraging me. So it was teased out from a number of places. And, in the end, why did it happen? I think probably because I've worked hard and I got pretty lucky.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I was going to ask, if you had any educator, and that's great. You had, as you said, Mrs. Kinney, someone who inspired you to do your work and really just patted you on the back and encouraged you, because I feel like that's really special and that's what keeps you going in this, to pursue this career, is having someone who's like, I see your potential and you should keep going.
Well, no question about that. And I'd be remiss, because the guy who was most influential in my career was my first news writing course at BU, George Sullivan, who had been a sports columnist in Boston for a long time.
Mm.
Oddly, he was one of the guys, thinking back on this, I wish George passed away 4 or 5 years ago, but he was among those who said, there'll always be work in print journalism, there'll always be newspapers. Well, in fact, he got to BU because his paper went under. It was the Boston, I have to think of the permutations here now. It was the Boston Herald Traveler. And the Boston Herald Traveler was owned by Channel 5 here in Boston, known at the time as WCVB. And it was the only case, and Jack, it may be the only case to this day that the FCC pulled its license.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I've actually said that, it was WHDH at the time. Those were the call letters. You'll have to forgive me, but that goes back 50 years. Anyway, WHDH lost its television license, and it also, at the time, owned the Herald Traveler.
Yeah.
So it lost its license, and it had to give up. It obviously everything went away, and the paper sold. So, at his advice, the newspapers would always be there. That's the route I went, and he was great. George also worked the copy desk in the Globe Sports department for a few years because he was moonlighting along with teaching. And I was the first of, I think, 10 or 12 kids he was able to get on the copy, and not the copy desk. We called it the Nighthawk desk at the time, but it was basically it was a copy editor. That's all it was, which I loved, frankly. So I came in as a copy boy, also known as a Nighthawk, because we had some young women doing it too. And I started there on February 28th, 1973, and said, I'm never leaving. So here I am.
And so obviously you got involved with the Boston Bruins, storied hockey franchise, of course. Tell me some of your favorite memories working with that team, whether it's the Stanley Cup they had in 2011 against the Vancouver Canucks, or whatever memory. It's a great franchise. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, I've done them about 45 years now, going on 45 years. Let's call it 40 plus. And much of it, of course, as you find out, as we only knew for a long, long time here in covering Boston sports, ultimately it was just watching a team and finding its new way to disappointment. That was true for the Red Sox, of course, from 1918 to 2004. The Patriots, this juggernaut now, or at least until Brady left, they were a laughable franchise in the American Football League, and for much of their early going in the NFL as well. Really, if you were actually getting in the business to cover championships, not that there probably are people who do that, not me, but some. You probably best to hitch your wagon, at least in the 60s, into the 70s on the Celtics. Mm-hmm. Yep. So there's been a lot of disappointment. There's a long way of saying that initially what I wanted to be was a baseball beat writer, and I was for the Red Sox starting in the late 70s. I think I was a beat man when I was 24 or 25. And we had an office coup. After a couple of years, I was on the beat, and the old guys on the baseball beat who resented the couple of us who had come in as new guys got their guy as the boss. And then essentially I was told, you can either leave or you can go do the NHL. Well, where was I going to go?
Yeah.
So I went and did the NHL. And I was happy to do it. I was, I'm breezing over a whole lot of bruised ego in that I loved baseball. I played it. I loved being on that beat. But I was, in the long run, delighted that it never happened, that it didn't happen. One of the underlying ironies there, and I'm going off into crazy places, is that baseball really does. It's different when you're young, but it can suck the life right out of you because it's every day. It's 162 games. When you're in New England, it's every good day of the weathers. You get out you've worked every good weather day, and then your reward for all this is that you have the winter. So, but the underlying irony is at the Herald, at the New York Times, where I worked for about 3 years after the Herald, and multiple times in my 36, 37 years that I've been back at the Globe, I had sports editors really wanting me to go do baseball, and I just wanted no part of it.
Yeah.
And I would say, as I always did, if you tell me I have to do it, I'll do it, and with no complaint. But I didn't want to do it, and so I haven't done it.
So last question here. Just give some advice to young professionals like me who are looking to go into journalism, looking to go into beat writing. What are some tips? What should I do?
Well, I think some of these things will be universal, even though they're rooted in 40 odd years of experience. So some of it comes from a time that some of these things may sound antiquated, but I do think you've got to be prepared. Don't take these jobs as luxuries or cushy situations. I know there's people are, and I was enamored by the sports world and the professional sports and the personality of it and the money of it. It's the entertainment business. It is. But from our side of the fence, it's a lot of work. If you're a beat person in the NHL, those game days usually begin around, depending on when you leave your house, but let's say you leave your house at 9 a.m. Typically, you're not going to be back until 1 the next morning. It's a long work day. It's not hard work. Well, it can be hard work, but it's not like going down into a coal mine, is it? To chip away for 14 hours. But you've got to be diligent about it. You've got to be eager to work, and you've got to be persistent. You've got to be able to create under the gun in terms of pressure and deadline. But most of all, I know this probably sounds corny. You have to be right. You have to be correct. You can't be sloppy with your facts. You can't be sloppy with your biases. You've got to be fair to people. You've got to go in prepared, and I've watched this on the other side for young folks like you, Jack, and probably hundreds that I've talked to. Often they'll have their list of questions, they're prepared, and that's great. It's also great to know something about the person, like in this situation. I mean, obviously, if you're doing Michael Jordan, you would know about Michael Jordan. But if it's someone you don't know, it's good to have some basic facts, so the person you're interviewing actually knows what you're talking about, and you've had enough interest to know who that person is. Be right with your facts. But back to that list, when you're going through the questions only lead to more questions. Mm-hmm. Questions are infinite. So you've got to be prepared, first of all, to improvise off the questions. And the only way you can improvise or add to is by listening to the answers. People go in with these checklists almost like it's grocery shopping, that I've got 15 things I've got to put in the basket here. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to run through the aisles and get those 15 things as fast as I can and get home, right?
Yeah, even if they're not related.
Right, even if they're not really. Well, when you get home, you're going to have to turn that into a meal, right? They don't carry the story themselves. You've got to listen to the answers. You've got to think critically with the answers in terms of asking the next one. And typically in the end, you're going to wish you only had more time to ask more questions.
Well, that's just wonderful advice, and it makes a ton of sense. And I want to thank you so much for coming on, agreeing to this interview. I learned so much today, and thank you so much. And good luck.
Well, you're welcome. It's an honor to be with you. I'll look forward to seeing you down there at the time and meeting some of your colleagues. And I wish you well, and all your colleagues as well too.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, pal.